If you're in Australia, chances are, when it comes to investment, people have gone, real estate's a good place to put your money. Superannuation, off you go. And those two things are fair. What about beyond that? I'm not a financial advisor. Nothing you're about to hear is going to constitute as financial advice. But there are other places where you can put your money, where your money can not only work for you, but also extend your value system into the world through the companies that you choose to invest in. When it comes to risk and reward, there are a few places which have quite a ratio, like startup investing. Now, my guest today is known for his very keen eye in spotting promising startups. He's also known for his belief in supporting ambitious founders as they tread the early days of bootstrapping an idea out into the world. If you've never explored this environment, today we're going to delve into the fascinating world of venture capital, entrepreneurship, and to be honest, the future of technology with Stew Glynn. He is the co-founder and managing partner at 1013, which is Australia's largest syndicated investment platform. His involvement with 1013 has been nothing short of remarkable. As a venture syndicate, they've already raised and invested $30 million into 14 separate breakout technology companies worldwide. That's a pretty good track record. Stew's making waves in the world of finance and technology, and today is really going to share with us his journey from his earliest years growing up in Zimbabwe to his transition into the world of angel investing and syndicate funding. If you've never thought about this kind of stuff, if you've always thought that this kind of investing or making your money work for you, or making your money do things in the world in a way like this, if you thought that was out of your reach, you're about to learn a lot from Stew. Enjoy. I'm so glad you came, mate. Thank you so much for coming.
It's awesome. Awesome to get online, for sure.
Yeah, man, because it's a really, what I'd love to talk to you about is, people kind of, they see stuff about AI and they see stuff about startups kind of roll past them in their day and not really understand, A, that, that's another form of investing, just like real estate.
Yeah.
And B, the signals that where capital's going can be, an early kind of indicator of what kind of world we're growing up into. And that's me. I'm on the outside of all this kind of stuff, so I can I vaguely can follow things around. So I'm grateful you're here, man. And
it's awesome.
Yeah, you're in Sydney doing a bit of work, I imagine.
Yeah, that's right. Just caught up with a bunch of our portfolio companies. So, we invest in technology companies as a starting point. So we're almost like one of the first checks in when there's a handful of people in the room got an idea, start building something, get a bit of traction, and we often come in at that point and sort of provides early stage capital to those companies to help sort of build it out over time. And as you said, what are the themes sort of coming out? We get to spend obviously a fair amount of time, we believe at sort of forefront of those trends, and trying to invest, I guess, ahead of the curve, trying to basically sort of back companies that'll be sort of great companies into the future, but they start off with just sort of a flame from the beginning. So you've sort of got to have belief in the people and their mission and what they're trying to build, and then sort of get in behind them.
I will get into that because I lived in America for about 10 years and I dabbled in the startup scene there. To the point where I went pitching on Sand Hill Road, and I started getting people committing to capital, and I was getting ready to go, but then things in my personal life kind of fell to bits and they all kind of went away. And then I see the idea that I had get up other people. I'm like, well, of course, because it's, what's the word? Independent invention is the norm. The same idea pops up on different sides of the world all the time. The solo hero inventor who creates the solution to save a situation is more of a Hollywood fantasy. Things like light bulbs and telephones and airplanes, all this kind of shit was invented by different people all the time. It's usually the person that just got the patent first. That's the one that is the credit. So it was nice to see that. It was like, good. It was I'm on the right path. But you weren't always in angel investing. Were you in more kind of traditional finance kind of scenario?
Yeah. So my background, grew up in Zimbabwe in Africa, which is a bit of a wild journey.
See what you did there? Hey, wild.
100%. And then
like baboons in your backyard, kind of wild. Do you tell people you ride a kangaroo to school, like we do?
We told a few people, and they actually believed us back in the early days. But to ride an elephant to school type stuff, but never actually. We had a pretty privileged sort of lifestyle. Grew up in my father was in the sort of on the, I guess, safari and hotel industry. So spent a lot of time in the bush, like very special sort of place in my heart. I guess like from a wildlife perspective, it was a beautiful place, but also had some, obvious challenges in Zimbabwe, some political side. But then, moved out to Australia early days and sort of went into, I guess, finance. So worked for corporates like General Electric and KPMG. I guess cut my teeth on that type, I guess, like more traditional.
Hang on, like my first job was answering phones for my dad in his practice. Like, how do you get a gig at General Electric? Like, this is, like, speaking of patents, this is like, what did General Electric do out here?
Yeah, so GE, I guess, like one of the only listed companies from the first time the stock exchange was set up, sort of like about 120 years ago. So they are a broad sort of industrial business, but they also had a finance arm. So managed to get into sort of GE, I guess, Capital, which was like a corporate lending business. So quite an odd sort of early stage. But I actually was struggling. I came from Zimbabwe, didn't have a visa, couldn't apply to any grad programs. Had to sort of leverage my network, try and find a way in, and managed to, I guess, like, hustle my way into like an early stage job, and then from there they kind of helped me worked hard, and they sort of put me onto like a leadership program and started doing rotations through different parts of the business. So worked in like healthcare, mining. They bought a big company up in Brisbane called Industria for sort of $800 million, and was one of the deal team there, and got a lot of exposure to kind of like, I guess, the world of finance and running those big companies, and exposure to leadership. But then sort of thought that wasn't the world that I loved. Like, my father was an entrepreneur. I like to spend time with those sort of folks. So I was like, how do I get closer to that?
Hearing you say like a deal is $800 million and I was on the deal team, like this kind of stuff is beyond nearly everybody listening. Anybody watching is like, who the fuck? One of the things I learned when I was in the States, someone told me, it's like, someone's going to do it. It may as well be you.
Yeah.
And like, they're just people in that room. They're people who've 100%. Got connections. They're people who've got a set of skills that, there's probably a university course or there's flight miles involved, but there's nothing godlike about these people.
Totally.
They're just in the room and understand where people are trying to get to on either side of the show, right?
Yeah. 100%. It's weird. You have like imposter syndrome, right? I guess, like always. And so who knows? But, even in our life now, like, you were just saying you spent some time at Sand Hill Road. So we were there 2 weeks ago, sort of meeting up with folks that are very senior, talking about artificial intelligence coming out of Google, Meta, and like they're probably the top 1% of technical people in the world, giving us this, and you sort of pinch yourself and you're like, why are we here? Like, how are we even sort of in this room with these sort of people?
Yeah.
And then you're sort of talking to some of the world's best investors, and like, I guess like what I've figured out, I guess like over time, is like you just got to have a crack. I mean, we've built a large investor network and have some awesome folks that sort of support us, but you kind of, that all started with just like one outreach and one sort of connection, and over time it's sort of, it just sort of starts to snowball and happen, I guess. Like, so you can make it happen, I guess. You can will it into existence.
Well, I can't will myself a six pack. I've got to be careful what I eat. I've got to make sure I do all my I've had a six pack once for about 18 hours. I've got to do all my deadlifts and I've got to eat really carefully. You can't will something in. Yes, I can have the will to do the reps.
That's correct.
But I can't just think real hard and then boom.
That's right.
I'm skinny. So there's got to be something that you learned along the way when you make that call, when you make that cold call, that you started to find to be effective.
Yeah. I think it's just having the confidence and the risk to do it. So I'll give you an example. So when I first started, I was excited about sort of technology. I was covering it. I used to work in sort of the deal space, and I basically got connected to Steve Baxter. So this is like the initial story. And I guess I pitched at like a startup weekend.
People may know him from Shark Tank.
He's on Shark Tank. Steve was one of the sharks. Sort of multiple-time telco entrepreneur, but then started wanting to invest in early-stage technology. And he said like he started making some investments, but didn't really have much of a deal background. He was more of sort of entrepreneur, operator side. And then he wanted to set up like, I want to start investing in more of these and supporting these companies, but didn't. And on my side, I sort of had more of a deal background, a finance background, but hadn't really spent as much time in technology. But anyway, got connected just on like a startup weekend, which is like effectively you just go and try and spin up a business from nothing, and got judged and got ripped to pieces by Steve at the end of it from the one idea that we sort of pitched as a little group. But then we sort of built a relationship, and he went out to hire for the only role in Brisbane that was in technology, sort of investing, and I think I remember the conversation was like, he was like, look, I thought the opportunity would be awesome. It was like the beginning of a wave of some awesome stuff happening in Australia. But I had to go to my wife and say, look, Steve's offered me this role to come and head up investing, and let's go and kick it off. And we had to sort of say we're going to cut my salary down in half at least. And, we should take this risk, and why should we do that? And is it going to be beneficial for us? And kind of the rest is history, because I did it, decided to do it. I thought it would be the right thing, kick it into gear and have a crack. But then, since then we've invested in some amazing, Australia's like successful tech businesses. A bunch of them have been really exciting.
Yeah, you've done some huge stuff. I wanted to, but tell me, not everyone's going to get a call going, "Hey, we want you to be, potentially this could be the biggest thing ever." One day it will be Warren Buffett, but everyone's going to have at some point talk to their partner about, "Hey, how would you feel about less money and no friends,
and
because
more
we're
risk?
moving across the country, and less me"? How did that conversation go?
Yeah, I mean, she was pretty understanding. I mean, I think like at the same time, I was working quite hard in sort of like mid-tier investment banking sort of stuff, but I was also trying to start my own e-commerce business. So I was trying to spin up like a sunglasses. It was when influencers were kind of becoming quite a big thing, and we're sort of direct to consumer. So I spun up a brand and we're sourcing stuff from China and trying to do that anyway on the side. So I was trying to build a business, which was taking up a lot of our time. And I was like, Steve was like, "Look, how about you give up the hula hoops and yo-yos and come work with us?"
Hula hoops and yo-yo. You did work for him. Like, that's exactly what he would say.
Yeah, it's too good. But it was arguably true. But then I guess like the take for me was like, am I going to be in a corporate sort of career for a long time, or should we take some risk and actually and see if it sort of plays out? And I think coming back from like, I guess a place like Zimbabwe where kind of have no safety net. Like everyone there is an entrepreneur by nature because they have to be. There's no kind of like, there's hardly any corporate jobs. There's no sort of like government infrastructure that sort of will support, I guess a bunch of careers. So you end up with this, like everyone just hustles and makes their way. And I felt like that, I don't know if it was in my blood, but I was just like, look, I'm keen to do something like that.
Yeah.
And get closer to working with people that are doing that at the coalface, not necessarily the big machines that they become over time. So yeah, I mean, we had the conversation a few times, and she was like, "Look, I'm supportive." At that time we didn't have kids, didn't have a mortgage. It was kind of like,
if we're going to do it,
it's like if you're going to do it, you should do it before you sort of take on that not burden, but before that happens, then your risk tolerance starts to get much lower, right? And so it's like, should you go and do that, or you're more constrained? And so we sort of bit the bullet. And it's I haven't looked back since, to be honest.
So the kind of investing we're talking about, it's not like, I'm going to put $500 into BHP share, and I'm choosing that share because I get dividends, and I'm going to use those dividends to maybe reinvest and get some more shares, or I'm going to live off the dividends if I'm on some sort of fixed income scenario. It went up 1.2% top day. It's not that kind of investing, is it?
It's definitely not that type of investing. I think out of Steve's family office, we were counting the other day where I think close to 80 companies that have invested in. I think like I can remember maybe 2 paying a dividend in the history of it. So like these businesses are not, I guess like the investment model and like coming from a more traditional finance model, like, came from that. It's like highly profitable businesses, et cetera, and trying to understand, it's a different world. Like we're basically living in a far different world, and then the model is different, especially in venture capital, where companies are effectively raising money to go and build to sort of win market share. Sort of first of all build their businesses into existence, find product market fit, try and find their first customers, and then start scaling a business model that's over time that's scalable and defensible and sort of take market share and all of this type of stuff. But there's a whole bunch of risk associated with that. And so, if you only invest in one, there's very high risk that like you won't even see your money coming back at all. These are like illiquid, sort of investing in a company and expecting, it's been a 10-year sort of cycle before you're kind of likely to see exit. Right. It is a long journey, but we've had great sort of results over the years that have come in, but you can't sort of pick at day one of like where the results going to be for this business. And so
you don't sign Mariah Carey every day.
Yeah, exactly.
But when you do, it's fine because all the records Mariah Carey sold kept other parts of the record company afloat.
That's exactly the model. It's very similar model, right?
It really is,
like,
though, isn't it? Yeah.
We're a hits business.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, venture capital is very much like it's called the power law. Effectively, like you might make 20 investments and one of them will return like 3 times all of your invested capital. And there'll be others that return somewhat, and there might be maybe 50%. They even talk about loss rate in venture as like early stage venture capital. Loss rate is like how many of your investments will return less than the dollar, or nothing. And like arguably a lot of seed funds, like at our stage, will aim for 50%. I guess like we think of it as like high potential companies. It's like if they win and succeed, they're going to be relatively disruptive, but also have like huge opportunity ahead of them, can make markets.
But it's not like like I said, it's not like a 2% or 5%, there's stuff like that. We're talking 10, 20x on your initial investment.
Yeah, I mean, we've had multiple companies that have returned, like over 20x
far out
on a deal, but we've also had ones that have returned nothing, right?
I'm sure.
So there's it's kind of like it washes, it washes out. But the model is very much like you have to understand the risk and you have to build a portfolio, otherwise you can't.
But it's a difficult kind of investing to get into because, like, I don't know that the two ladies that have just had lunch at the UTS canteen and come up with this unbelievable business idea that's going to completely destroy all online retail. Yeah. But they'll probably go to their parents or probably their mates' parents, and that's how they'll get $5,000 to buy the first thing. And like those people who put that first early money in, when you mentioned exit before, when they exit or when they go public, essentially have the IPO or whatever. That's the colossal thing. But what I believe what is that you guys do at 1013 is you connect, people who have an idea that it's a 50-50, it's a coin flip, you're never going to see your money again. Yeah. And when you do, it's going to be a while away. But if you do see your money again and it is a while away, it'll be worth it. We promise you on that one. That you connect the people like that with these kind of young founders who've got this, have got products that you guys believe in.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess the easiest way to think about it is like we've talked about 1013 as effectively trying to democratize access to this, to a class of investment that's quite hard to get access to. Yeah. And the reason why we started down that track was we started trying to do it ourselves and trying to find access to great companies and we call it, everyone in our industry calls it deal flow. So it's like how do you get more deals coming through the door that you can look at and then back yourself to pick to be a good, I guess, like investor. But if you don't see enough deals or you only get the last ones off the like that are the highest risk, or you don't have the opportunity to sort of get the right sort of level of returns to take all that risk. And so you want to get access to a lot more deals. So we started building like, how do you go and find that? Started building networks and working with other investors and, hosting events for founders and like trying to basically become part of the community so that you're seen as a trusted source to go to for this type of funding. But that takes time and effort and resource and like you have to invest in it. Even if Steve was investing personally, it was almost not even enough. You might be putting in $250K or $500,000, but a seed round is $2 million. And so we would go talking to other investors and be like, who wants to, club together on a deal here? We really love this business for all these reasons. And we'd bring it together. And so we thought like, why isn't there a way for this to be done more formally? And so we kicked off 1013 about 3.5 years ago. And now we have one of Australia's largest groups of investors that co-invest with us on deals. So we have 500 plus investors around Australia and New Zealand that are awesome, like operators, and we think of that network as like hugely valuable because they help us find new deals. They've got people that have got such a variety of backgrounds, whether they're their own sort of traditional industrial businesses, whether they're tech founders themselves, whether they're doctors, like people that have variety of experience. Then you can pick up the phone and be like, hey, what do you think of this business? And sort of super helpful.
Is there also something that after the deal is done, like say, I don't know, you're a year and a half, you're 2 years in, and you're getting close to launch and some of your people go, oh, what we really need is we really need someone to manufacture a widget like this. You know what? We actually know someone who might help us with that.
And oftentimes they're an investor, right? So it's like, I mean, I did it today. I made like 3 introductions to people where there's someone who's very solid at sort of launching. It's like, I guess, the go-to-market model and the sales model and done it for 3 other very successful software businesses. And he just sort of said, hey, I'm really interested in sort of helping out on a few like early stage companies, like if you want, if you have any, and I'm like, I've got a lot of companies that we work with, so I'd like to introduce you and plug you in, and so that network value like sort of compounds on itself, in my opinion. So like that's why we did this model, which is like we sort of provide access for investors to club together on deals, but then also we've got latent like an amazing network of people that you can plug into or you can sort of leverage. It's harder to scale this sort of model, but it's also truly valuable. Like if they open the door to your next customer or they help you solve problems, like that's real value for that company because they get to the next hurdle and they keep going, if you know what I mean. So that's why we sort of built it like that. But it's but then it also enables more people to get access to deals that we've done due diligence on, we're co-investing often with other venture capital investors. We co-invest with some great names that have also done all the work, and we're part of that. But you don't have to sort of commit. You can kind of just choose the deals that you want to join in on.
And this is the thing that I find interesting, is that once you reach a certain, I guess, velocity, there's an inertia about who you are and the network you represent, when ideas will just start coming in through the door so fast.
Yeah.
And you don't want to be you don't want to be Decca Records passing on the Beatles. You want to be the one that, you want to be, you want to be sure that you say yes to the right stuff, but that means you'll have to say no to the right stuff. So at what point did you start to, create a bit of a series of gates that people had to pass through before? And what does that look like?
Yeah, we have like a whole process, I guess. So this month we would have seen 180 companies that are looking for funding.
God damn.
And we've closed. We just signed a deal today, so we'll have closed two of those. Two companies would have gone through the process and be invested in, and we end up doing about 15 to 20 new companies a year. And we will look at 2,500.
And how do you do that? You're not Warren Buffett, who can see clear P&Ls for years in the prior. You're talking about
there's
sometimes, sometimes you're sitting down with people who are it doesn't exist yet.
Yeah.
We've got code that runs on a machine over there in the corner, and that's it.
That's right. we're talking about a company right now that's doing so we spent a lot of time diving into AI over the last year, and we believe it's one of the next waves, the next platforms in technology. It's going to impact a lot of industries. And then what are the inputs in there? And one of them is, say, proprietary data. And so how do you have the right level of, how do you have clean information that you can put into this model so it's not garbage in, garbage out, so this model can then start giving you good answers? Because if you don't have the right sort of feeder, then you're not going to get the right results. And so we're looking at a company that's got some synthetic data, but literally they have no customers right yet. They spun out the technology from a university, super smart, probably bleeding edge in terms of their, I guess, knowledge and what they've been working on from a technical perspective. But now we've got to say, can they actually build this? We believe they can build it. Can they take it to market? Can they get customers? So you start trying to validate on that. But I think in the early days, it's very heavily focused on people. If you can't judge, you have to have high level of trust and conviction that these people are the right people for this business, as well. So we call it founder market fit, and are going to be willing to go on the journey of it's a tough road being an entrepreneur. Not everyone can do it. It's very challenging. You put a lot of things. They're often sort of very mission driven and very dedicated. And so you have to sort of understand are they the right people to back? And
so I'm imagining at that point, if there's even just a prototype of a product, but they know, everyone's kind of understanding, well, this is going to be something. Yeah. We should go see how big we can make this and scale this. You can't evaluate that product because it hasn't got a market. You're investing in the people really at that point, aren't you? What kind of things do you look for in these men and women that you meet?
I think at a baseline, there's certain relatively basic stuff, do they have the skill set to do it? So if it's a technical product, but then they don't have any sort of tech skills, that's a challenge for us to invest. It's almost a blanket no, because if they just we're putting in money into their business and then they're paying some, a dev house on the side, that's it's not a good sign, because it's we know that this business, any product technology business, is going to evolve. Some of our favorite companies that have gone on to be super amazing businesses have rebuilt their tech from scratch 3 or 4 times. So you just know forever that they're going to be investing in this, and they need to have the capacity in house. So that's a basic it's just one of those questions that you learn to ask in due diligence. But that's kind of different to qualities, right? And then the other one is what do you look for? So some investors have different views. Some people say we won't invest in a couple because it's very difficult. Whereas some of our best companies who invested in have been couples, and they are kind of happy to go on the journey together, and they it does mean that they sometimes breaking bread at dinner and sort of talking about their days, and they struggle to leave work and sort of at home, but at the end, but they also you just have to understand whether you're happy to take that risk as an investor and on this sort of people. I think it comes down to sort of passion and capability. Often it's are they the right people? You can often sort of tell if are people in it for the right reasons. Are they excited to solve a problem? What's their background? Have they come from a very safe background, or have they come from a level of adversity, and that's made them sort of like very passionate about trying to solve this problem and why. Because the why is often what keeps you going when it's like you're working sort of through weekends and at night. And because oftentimes companies blow up or have issues to do with the team and the founders. Like I would say it happens up to 50% of the time. You'll have issues over the course of their life where like a founder will leave or a founder will have other issues and decide that it's.
I guess what you're talking about is like if what's driving you is, I'm doing this because it's my quickest path to owning a Lamborghini. That might not get you through the kind of work and decision making that you'll need. It's like, I'm doing this because, making sure that people who, I don't know, deal with an inner ear problem that means they can't hold a spoon straight can feed themselves.
That's right.
No matter what, that's going to happen. It might get a Lamborghini at the end of it because it scales and, you
100%.
settle over the world. But it's not good. That's going to keep you walking through the night.
Exactly. So I think that like, instant red flag when someone's just like talking about the pot of money at the end and it's more about like, what happens if you win? Like, what have you created that's actually of value that's going to, help this world or help solve this problem?
Yeah.
And the byproduct of that is a big pot of money.
Yeah.
Potentially, not always, but like this is the scenario, right? So if someone sort of says like, we're going to exit this business, in 3 years' time to here, like we're sort of saying, well, why are you even thinking about that? Like you should be thinking about building a great, valuable business and like, yes, we'll make decisions as a business or like, as a leadership or over time if it's the right thing to do to sell the business or IPO it or whatever it is. Like that decision can be made if you built a great business of value. But like
it's really, you know what? And we say this in reality. I don't say it in reality television, but I hear it at work all the time. Are they there for the right reasons?
Yeah, that's exactly the saying, right? 100%.
But in this case, the money is the an analog to a sexual encounter.
Yeah.
He's just here to shag me. It's like versus he's here to fall in love. It's like, well, we all know what that guy or that girl at the pub
on The Bachelor,
like, yeah. Oh no, we're just leaving when you're out.
Yeah.
When you're out and about, it's like, there's a TV show at the moment called F-Boy Island. I'm loving it, and it's basically it's like, nah, that guy, it looks great product, but intention
not for the right reasons.
Not a long-term investment, which is kind of interesting. Yeah, I guess the other thing I wanted to ask you is that what's your vibe on meeting with founders who say to you, okay, yeah, I'm here, this is my friend, and we've got this thing, and you ask what did they do before? It's like, I raised $10 million and we made this thing and everything burned to the ground. And that was 2 years ago. Yeah. And this is the next thing. Like, what are you reluctant to work with someone who's failed like that? Or are you happy to invest with someone who's failed like that?
I think like you would work hard to understand like the context of what happened there. Mm-hmm. So I think as in Australia, don't celebrate failure the same way someone like say in Silicon Valley is. And it's not about celebrating failure for the sake of just like, they spectacularly failed and wasn't a great result. Like no one sort of pats people on the back for that. But if they failed, in search of trying to find or trying to build something great and it didn't quite work out but they still did their best to sort of make it happen and did the right thing when sort of winding down and trying to look after their team and stuff when trying to find them new jobs and stuff like that. If they did the stuff like that in the right sort of ethical manner, then I think that it's generally viewed positively by our industry. Because like what you do is you learn a hell of a lot, like in the good and the bad, more in the bad. And there's a lot of challenging sort of situations that you go through. And so it's like, well, then for next time, like that's scar tissue. You don't want to tread that ground again. So you know for sure. Yeah. And this is like, it's a really interesting concept because like second time founders come with what's called like the people that build a second business, so whether it's successful or not, have, I guess called it's like a second time founder premium. It's like you pay more because they supposedly know that sort of way. But the interesting thing that I found over time is that often naivety is like an interesting thing. It's actually quite good. I'll give an example. Steve Baxter, right? He's built, spent 2 businesses building in the telecommunications space, but now he won't really invest in that space anymore. It's like, I've done my time in that space. I know I know how hard it is. I know the good stuff. I know the bad stuff. And you'll probably be very potent if I went and set up a third business now, but I just don't want to go back in there. Like I know all about it and I know where the challenges are. And so often people won't go back into the same category that they've been in, even if they're founding again. Like they want something fresh and new and start again, like, with a new sort of pathway, but you still learned a hell of a lot. Yeah. I guess the naivety side is an interesting concept where people, oftentimes like young founders, they call it 25-year-old that just wants to set out to go and change the world. But sometimes those are good people and they have had sort of great outcomes because they don't know how hard it is, and they get out there and they're like, oh my God, this is tough. But it's, oftentimes, but they don't know what they don't know, and then they try and solve it in different ways.
Yeah.
Versus some folks, who might be more seasoned in the industry, but then then you kind of sometimes get tunnel vision on, well, this is the way it's solved, and then you kind of stay in your lane.
You mentioned earlier that the space that we're kind of getting into now, and there's all of history before the atom was split, and then everything else.
Yes.
Until the end of time.
Yep.
Like we can never, ever unsplit the atom,
yes.
and the ability to release that amount of energy, for good or bad, is now in our world,
yes.
and we just have to deal with it.
That's right.
I would dare say we are now living in the time after large language models have been unleashed. Like you'd
right.
sooner be able to de-electrify a city than you would to, wait, stop this. A couple of weeks back, there were people going, wait, let's hold everything. It's like, mate, like who's going to hold
the bottle?
Who's going to hold what?
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
And terrifying at the same time, to the point where even the people that started OpenAI today joined the team from Google, and they released this whole thing going, you need to look at this as you look at nuclear non-proliferation. It is that dangerous if it's not done right.
Yeah.
Is that hyperbole, or do you reckon that's kind of what we might be looking at?
I think there's no doubt about it. AI is going to be part of the world going forward.
Yeah.
I feel like the genie is out of the bottle. The aha moment per se for people trying to understand at a human level is ChatGPT and what it can do. And so, sit down with my wife and say, look, let's plan our like weekly food shop recipes, stuff like that, like super basic stuff. But it gave you the thing like this thing actually has power. Like if you know what I mean. Yeah, I mean there's a portion of it that's scary on the ethical side, right? And we spend a bunch of time talking to some of the experts in AI over the last couple of weeks, just trying to get a clear understanding of it. And I think that right now in its current form, it doesn't feel like it sort of thinks for itself in the same way that people believe it is. It's just trained on billions of parameters so that it feels like it's way smarter than you, but it's just lots of different decisions being made within the course of a model.
And it's reflecting the data that's been learning on,
yes,
which is
historical data
of human input.
And then, but once you start feeding in more information, when you start closing the loop and you sort of continue to feed it, that's why I said, should we give it access to the internet? Maybe we shouldn't, because then it starts being able to sort of learn on itself.
Too late, bro.
It's already done, right? And then the other thing is say OpenAI and Anthropic are the big players that are building sort of the closed ecosystem model. So they train their models. So OpenAI, $30 billion business now, invested in by Microsoft. They do ChatGPT, but they also have an API product and a bunch of others. They are going to be kind of like the Google or the Microsoft obviously are major investors. They're going to own a good chunk of this market, right? They're going to be the underlying infrastructure layer. But at the same time, say Llama, which is a Facebook model, it cost them $500 million to train it, and then it got kind of leaked and can be downloaded on BitTorrent now, and you can effectively run that sort of model almost on your laptop
with $500,000 of R&D in your pants.
$500 million.
God damn.
I mean, there's a little bit of skepticism around, say what OpenAI is talking about of let's regulate this, because they call regulatory capture, which is like we can say, we should regulate this, and therefore we will be deemed to be one of the ones that can be, within the regulatory framework.
Yeah.
But then that means that we get people are forced to use us and not allow others sort of, that are in the open source world to do it. So there's a little bit of posturing whether it's the reason why they're calling for regulation is because they know it's too late, and they're but then they get forced by the government will or generally the regulators will say, well, okay, great, like OpenAI and Anthropic and you folks, we can help control you, and we can put the guardrails on this AI, on these large language models.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's an interesting concept of how it's sort of going to play out. But I do think from an ethical perspective today, from the discussions that I've had, it doesn't feel like it's out of hand in the current scenario, but there is a point in time where they call it singularity, or the ramp is so fast that it starts becoming a lot more powerful, and you can't control it because you don't have the guidance. So I do believe it's going to be and this is sort of general consensus across the venture community. You go to Silicon Valley, you go talk to a bunch of investors. Crypto, there might have been say 20% of folks being we think this is going to be it's going to be a major a major space, and like, you know, one of the next things gonna replace the financial system, etc. And the US dollar is gonna move to Bitcoin, whatever. When you talk to a lot of like the high profile investors, they are ubiquitously saying like AI is the next wave. It's been mobile, it's been cloud, like there's been all these sort of shifts over time, and it's about the next wave, and this is going to impact across every industry. But the difference being is that consumer products, you can, you know, pick it up quite quickly and use them and get value quite quickly. So it's already happening, right? Adobe just released one where, I don't know if you've seen it, you've got like, you know, a picture and you can just literally extend the border by, you know, double the size of the picture and just say, you know, just formulate what this should look like, and then bang, you've already got it. So like all these products are just rolling out, right, on a daily basis. It's almost very hard to keep up. But I think that the one that's going to be interesting, and we think there'll be a fair amount of value, is in the business side. So like how do you enable your workforce to be not superhuman, but like get more productivity out of your team and effort? And this is going to be across, like, there's going to be new roles created, but there's also going to be across like how do you amplify people from a coding perspective. So there's going to be a whole bunch more code written. Therefore, there's going to be a whole bunch more productivity from a software perspective.
Like even my
like
in my
accounting,
own
lawyers.
in my own kind of people that I'm close with. There's somebody that I know who I think they had 6 coders in their office. That I have 2.
Yeah,
and he was able to go like, okay, he fed his code into a particular thing, and it just like debugged it in like seconds.
Yeah,
and then asked another thing for how do we make this one more efficient? And went, and now they're there. And so they've gone from 6 salaries to 2 salaries. So 4 people don't have a job anymore, and they've increased their productivity. Like no business is going to say no to that. What do we do with those 4 people? It brings, we're being rapidly pushed into this place. We're going to have to start making some pretty, very, very quick decisions about how we feel about stuff. You know, you mentioned, you know, are we there at a point of, you know, singularity or sentience? And you know, remember, you know, watching Ray Kurzweil's work a while back, maybe 15 years ago. He was like all about that. I met him, wild guy. But for me, like using this microphone and my side of this conversation on a podcast I did a couple of weeks back, I fed it into an app on my laptop right there, and I was able to make a voice that only people who actually knew me knew it wasn't me. Yeah, you know, and like that's just a punter at home. You know, with some training data. You know, the terrifying thing for me is you're seeing, for example, overnight.
Like deep fakes, or like, you know, it's basically just like a video of you speaking and like,
you're
not
like
just
not
saying
man.
what you're doing.
Like
anyone,
Like we see these, you know, they're like drone attacks on Moscow saying, oh, it must be Ukraine. Like, dudes, like, how are they going to get anywhere near? Forget about it. We know it's not you. But convincing a population that this stuff is happening, like the one that Sam Harris talks about is it is possible right now to create Joe Biden on screen, you know, verbally saying, and that's why we've launched this a nuclear strike, the missiles in the air in 22 minutes, there'll be a whole new world. And then, you know, Moscow has, you got 19 minutes, Vlad. Yeah. How do we verify it? Okay, now you got 18 minutes. How do we verify this nuclear strike is or isn't happening? And like that's not even like grey matter. That's not even bots turning themselves into, you know, Terminator 2. Like it's fucking scary as shit.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, it's probably not a laughing matter, honestly. Like, you know, I think that's one of the challenges is like, I mean, we're looking at a company coming out of Israel that helps to understand whether messages via social like platforms are, you know, like are real, like effectively unreal people. And so, like, are they bots? Are they fake? Are they fake videos of people? How do you decipher whether something is real or not real? Because that can spread in propaganda, like you know, miscommunication. Like there are ways that you can sort of cyber warfare effectively. Like you can blur messages. You can influence people with like on social media platforms, etc. Right now they're so powerful,
mate.
Yeah,
we've seen that
exactly.
There was this. I remember there was this when I was living in the States. There was a Senate estimates community. Senate. I was right after I moved back. It was a Senate estimates committee and a Senator Al Franken, which is wild because Al Franken used to be on Saturday Night Live. Yeah. Al Franken asked Zuckerberg. He says, "Okay, did they invoice you in rubles?" And he's like, "I don't think I want it." It's like, it's a simple question, Mr. Zuckerberg. Did they invoice you in rubles? Yes. Like, come on, man. It's but that's the stuff that's transparent. This is just like, because there's probably people listening who've been affected by data breaches here in Australia, and it's hard to think, well, who could be bothered? Who could be bothered to attack a country like that? It's hard to not think it's some sort of bad actor, some sort of state actor. Are there ways that, this kind of tech can protect a country rather than be used offensively? Are there ways that this kind of thing can be used around our health data or around our banking data?
I mean, the short response is, of course, yes. But the way it sort of plays out is that you have to just try and protect against bad actors.
Yeah.
And you always we've invested in a company that helps trying to stop bots from cracking your passwords and breaking into your things.
Right.
And the way that it sort of works is over time they understand the way people sort of try and break in, and then they put up a wall and they figure that out. And so what they try and do is make it too expensive for them to try and break through the wall that they just stop trying. So by having more security, better ways of proving that you're not a bot, then the bot will over time just be like, if it tries too long, it's not worth it. It's not worth its time. So go find somewhere where there's weaker. And so what they do, but it's a constant fight. It's cat and mouse game, and they basically so you never solve it. Is probably the summary. It's like you just find ways to get more and more efficient and better. And you just have to keep sort of trying on this battle. And that's why we've got a handful of cybersecurity investments. But it's not only for bad actors in general, but in short, it's just this is part of the world that we live in, and oftentimes those sort of leaks or data leaks and stuff like that are a person that kind of opens the door and less of sometimes in a bad fashion, sometimes just from an error, you know what I mean? And
or as we saw in the States the other week, because he wanted to show off to a bunch of people on a Discord page.
Yeah, that's what I mean, right? It's just it's often you can't. You can't solve for everything, and so it's hard on those kind of scenarios where it's just how do you plan as an organization to protect that sort of thing when it could just happen.
They always say follow the money. If you want to see what's going on, follow the money. So
totally.
where's the money looking? When it comes to AI, what are some spaces that you expect to see kind of really radically changing in the next couple of years?
Yeah, there's the infrastructure, there's the layer that's kind of the model layer. We think that race is arguably going to be run and already run by some of the majors, I guess OpenAI, Anthropic, and there's a handful of other models, and then there's the open source community, and those combined, I'm not sure where the value will either be captured by those some of the players, but there will also be a great open source community.
And the model being this is how the large language model learns.
Yeah, so I think of it it's almost like a hardware product. Each model is trained, and it takes a shitload of compute. So basically, big racks of servers from NVIDIA. NVIDIA will probably do pretty well as it went up 25%.
They hit $1 trillion yesterday.
Yeah, exactly.
They were trillion for a couple of hours.
So we heard NVIDIA about 20 times on our trip recently, and it was basically just they've got the best chips, and they're 5 years ahead of everyone else. Is kind of
sorry for everyone who was mining crypto. It's all over.
Yeah, exactly. But now you're sort of training models, right?
Yeah.
So those models, they take a huge amount of money to compute and then even run post fact. So so those ones are going to be challenging to see. The big players are already sort of winning that race. And I think that the middle layer is what we call the picks and shovels, infrastructure. So it's almost that synthetic data business we're telling you about, or a developer tools to help with machine learning models, or a bunch of different. It's just the layer that you won't see it, but there will be a lot of players that'll be sitting in the middle there that sort of help enable this AI industry to start to open up and thrive. And then there's what's called the application layer, which is the top layer, which is effectively ChatGPT is one. So it's it's the one that gets used by the end consumer, whether it's in a work fashion or in a consumer perspective. So, I just want to generate a video, or I want to generate a poem for XYZ, or I want to, and those ones are already starting to see really fast growth on companies, but whether it's enduring is the main question. Or and then the other one is are the incumbents, are they going to do well? So when I say the incumbents, that example I said about Adobe was there were other players that were spinning up trying to do the solution, and everyone's oh, Adobe's going to get wiped out here. And then bang.
I don't know, man. I saw that video you're talking about. I'm buddy,
pretty cool. And so they have, those incumbents have the biggest data sets. Google, for instance, everyone's OpenAI is it's going with Microsoft and Google's stuff. But Google's got the most searches. They have the most data. They've indexed the whole of every website in the world, made them searchable. They have more information than anyone else. They can train a model on that, and they have Bard is there, but they're going after business solutions. So it's might not be as flashy. So like in our scenario, what we're thinking is that like most businesses are going to be, industries are going to be sort of impacted by AI and you start to utilize it. So a good example is like the legal profession, right? Drafting contracts. It's like, how many lawyers do you need to go through that? If you could just like, if you could train your own models on your whole database of all of your templates, so you know every single clause, and then you can basically build. And we've already seen products. We saw a company just started on revenue, raised like $12 million the other day, and they are helping you. It sort of plugs into Word, and then effectively, but it pulls from your own specific like legal database, and then so a lawyer gets supercharged and can draft much quicker.
That is astounding. And like if I'm an article clerk, I'm fine.
Yeah.
But that's astounding.
It is astounding, but I think that like you can't rely on it just yet. Like not just yet, but you can't rely on it. And when we get there, but it wasn't too long ago where you couldn't, I guess, like listen to this podcast, for instance, and then click a button and get a transcript of it straight away and have accuracy. It was like 50% accuracy. It was unreadable. Now we're sort of at like, I'm not sure, say 90%. And that'll keep getting better. And so, I guess like over time it'll improve. But yeah, at today's date, you definitely can't rely on, you can't like just blanket rely that this is totally accurate. For me, I say if I was a legal clerk, right, or as a sort of, early stage person trying to draft contracts, you basically go to the last template. Oh, we worked on this deal. It's very similar. Pull that one. Use that as a template. Let's as a precedent. And then just change these clauses.
Yeah.
Now you can literally spin it up. Like I'm not even kidding. Like in a day, like we've literally worked with folks that can spin it up, put your precedents in there, and then you can just quiz it. Be like, find us a template that's linked to this deal, and it'll just be like, here's a template, bang. Like it's like your own Google search, like within there. But then also like it starts to think and be like, hey, what's the actual clause in that contract that you can do that we should that was I remember from that deal.
At this point, the ability to have something bespoke for your own business is it easy to do or is it a little tricky?
It's easier than you think, but
really?
It's easier than you think, but like it's
not as simple as buying the Office suite and now I have spreadsheets.
Like, this is what I mean. So like when we talk about like infrastructure of businesses or something, it's like they're going to be businesses that pop up that enable this type of thing to start. So a business, for instance, can train it themselves, on their own data and things like that. But there's a whole bunch of things about data protection, privacy, like making sure, because at the end of the day, like a lot of businesses, even law firms, for instance, their precedents, that's their IP, right?
Yeah, right.
And so there's a lot of questioning, like we don't want to put our information or like our spreadsheets into, say, ChatGPT because you're feeding the machine, and they now have your data and they're training you, and then everyone else is getting the benefit of it.
Yeah.
So you want to have a closed garden of your own information that becomes. Then you can, but you want your team, like your staff and your team, to be able to use it. There's not yet like easy to use tooling to do the things you want to do across all the different things. So like procurement and making sure that there's data protection, so there's no leakage of this sort of stuff. And but I think that is the next stage. Like that tooling is really, we're discussing, like we're seeing a lot of companies doing this stuff that are going to enable that. And that once enablement happens, but then change, what doesn't happen overnight, especially in like the enterprise or corporate world, like it takes a long time to get that sort of decision making through. So I think that the change management is probably less about the technology, more about those enabling factors to like get that to an agreement that, say, like a board or something says, we think we should adopt this across our organization.
Yeah. You got little ones, I've got little ones.
Yeah.
What do you think education will look like? Like I'm talking like in 3, 4, 5 years when these kids are in primary school. What's education look like?
So we had a deal that we looked at before ChatGPT launched, where these 2 young university students had spun up a model that was helping people write their essays, like effectively. And there was strong opinion on one side that it was cheating. There was a strong opinion on the other side that like, are we digging our head in the sand because like it's happening? And so like, are we gonna have to build a world where we teach our kids and have to still train them, but it'll enable them to use these tools? Because like, say with social media, you can say don't go on social media, but like, is your kid not gonna go on social media, or are you gonna train them to not train them, but you're gonna sort of try and help them make sure they can deal with what social media is in a healthy fashion, and it's super challenging already, right? We're seeing the impacts of it, and so the same kind of concept I believe will happen with like this sort of thing is like we're going to have to. I don't say like embrace it with wide open arms. I believe you have to control it, but it's going to be part of like the future a little bit. I'm going to say so. But how do you train? Like how do you from an education perspective, like. I was talking to a student last night, actually, like he was sort of 19-year-old, And I said, do you use it? And he said, I haven't used it for my assignments yet, but my friends have. And I was like, okay, so like, why don't you use it? He's like, well, I only don't use it because I'm scared that I'm going to get caught. And it's like, he said, before you press submit, it tells you like, we think this is like copyrighted, or like, we think this has been generated by AI. If you submit it, like we know that you should, like, we know what it is. There's already tools that are saying like, this is AI generated content. So you should probably go and like do the work.
Wow.
So do you embrace it or do you not? Like, it's the challenge, the never ending question. And I don't know how you solve for that. Like,
I use a calculator.
Yeah.
I'm terrible at maths.
Yeah.
Unless it's Scrabble scores. I use spreadsheets. Anyone that doesn't use a spreadsheet, like if you have a look at the world before spreadsheets. There was rooms of people with mechanical calculators.
That's right.
And when one person changed something on one desk, they were all in a huge big room of desks. It would take. Hang on, we'll have an answer for you by lunchtime. You got to
do it.
I can change numbers in a spreadsheet, and that's
the compute's done.
That stuff, like, it's such a super powerful version of that. And I'm like the dream would be, man, like if we look at the positive use cases rather than the scary shit.
Totally.
School missed me. I went to it was a great school and it worked really great for some people, but it didn't work for me. Since found out why, various diagnoses later. Yet there's the opportunity to be like, okay, here's some little diagnostic tests that, little Billy and, little Sabine, they both do at the start of the year to figure out how their brains work. Here's where you got to get to pass the course at the end of the year. Okay, little Billy, that's what you're doing every week. Sabine, this is what you're doing every week. At the end of the year, you'll both be able to prove you know it.
Yeah.
But you will learn it in completely different ways.
Different pathway.
Yeah.
So, like, I think it's going to be super positive for things like healthcare, for instance.
Oh, man, yeah.
Like, we're talking to a company now that's doing, like, using AI for drug discovery. So it's like, how can you, because, like, so drugs, when they get, even the ones that get approved, still have a bunch of side effects. Like, why does it get to that point where because they've only done tests on, X amount of, like, trials, like, people, so, like, and then they've taken a view that that's, like, indicative of everybody, and and then they basically, it passes through. But that's because they've never been able to simulate and understand, like, is that, how this is going to play out. So the same kind of concepts in space, like we're looking at a satellite company that does simulations of like what happens in space if this happens or this changes or whatever. And these sort of things can compute like much faster and like than any human could ever do. So then, healthcare, picking up cancer from scans, like with machine vision, like they already are much more efficient than the human eye. But the challenge is like getting those use cases actually into the world. So like we love to back companies that are doing stuff like that, which is like, how do you get behind those people that are actually going to have a positive impact?
We asked about the traits you look for in founders. Do you look for an ethical upside? 100%. Unfortunately, it shows, and you see it every time that ultimately when people get a huge amount of power in whatever direction happens in religion, happens in churches when they start taking private jets everywhere.
I grew up in Zimbabwe with Robert Mugabe, and like this is power, like the elite and sort of corruption and everything that came with it. So
even the most ethical people, like it's real hard when you get at that level to not do stuff that's not good. Totally. So when you're seeing founders, like, do you look for people who are like, yeah, man, nah, wouldn't trust him?
100%. Yeah, we will not invest in someone if you get that feeling.
Yeah.
And it happens from time to time, but I'd say like most people are generally honest and have the right level of sort of integrity and intention. Yeah. So are they telling you the truth? Like, you don't have much to rely on, like in the early days of the companies, right? Like they don't have like audited accounts. They don't have, they'll have a very early stage working product. Like they might have a couple of customers. Like sometimes they didn't pilots. They don't even have like full contracts. And so, a lot of it comes back to that team. And do you think that like they're going to be able to galvanize it, like, and start building this and grow it and do all the stuff?
Yeah, but then I think about, old mate, she just started her, the lady that started the blood testing thing, the Theranos thing.
Theranos,
like, she started her jail sentence today.
11 years or something.
150, like, so I shouldn't expect, like, unbelievable. People just want to be in on it. That's the other thing. Like, investors, they want to be in on it. They will ignore everything. I mean, Bernie Madoff made, like, he did a lot and the people that paid him the money.
There's Adani, like, in India. Like, there's been a lot, like, right?
Oh, my God. BitConnect. Like, everyone just wanted to do, what was that? Our last one. The furry-haired guy in the
FTX?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, That's other people's money. That's not his money.
Yeah.
That's other people who probably were just so blinded by the idea of it's the next thing. I have to put the house on it, pushing the chips in, and not listening to their gut at all.
100%. As an investor, you have to check yourself pretty often on this type of thing.
Yeah.
And it can happen to you. Like, I mean, say FTX, for instance, like they were the second biggest exchange in the world. But they didn't have like board infrastructure, right? So they were literally sending basically pulling out money into like another investment vehicle, investing it. But that was like actual like users sort of assets and capital, but they didn't have the right governance and structure in place. And especially in times of hype, and this sort of probably will happen again in AI, there will be like, businesses that, like lack ethics, I guess you'd say.
So what would you say to people who, want to throw their super fund at something in AI because, well, they want that, they want to get that, 1992 Google share. They want to buy Bitcoin at 2 cents.
Yeah, exactly. Look, I mean, we're investing in the space, but like with enough level of caution. Not every company is going to be a winner, so don't put all your eggs in one basket because there's definitely not going to be a good outcome.
Not financial advice.
Not financial advice, but definitely build a portfolio is all I'd say. But they're expensive. Like literally when you talk to these companies now, like these, especially in AI, like if it's got AI painted on it, like double the price or triple the price.
Wow.
Just because it's a hot category. And so, we literally talk to some of the best investors in the world in the last few weeks, and they're guns blazing on it, like mostly. And someone's sitting back saying we'll wait and see how it goes. And tech doesn't get adopted. It's like doesn't get adopted straight away. It's like slow, and then fast.
Yeah.
And that's already happened with AI. People have been talking about AI for a while, but there hasn't been the aha moment until people actually understand what's happened more recently because they've got more tangible with tooling that's like, there's a bunch of just different ones that sort of you've used yourself and you're like, oh my goodness, like this is pretty crazy, right?
And don't pay for it.
Yeah, and
because that's the thing. Like you'll open up your app store and it'll have like a billion things that say GPT. Yeah. You can literally just go to OpenAI and open an account, and it'll be faster and better quality than anything on an app.
Yeah,
but because that people don't know about that barrier to entry. I didn't know about it. And I was like, fuck, I just paid $90 for something that I'm getting for free, faster, better, directly from the source, you know? And that's a drag, but I got scammed by that. Totally.
But I think there's like, Jasper, for instance, which is a company that does like sales copy, right? So it's like all marketing content. You can just type it in and be like, hey, help me write some copyright about, this advert or this business. So I believe they went from like 0 to like 100 million in revenue over the course of a few years, which is huge in the software space. Like that's incredibly fast. ChatGPT was the fastest company in history to get to 100 million users. It was like in a couple of months from memory. I can't remember. It's basically like way faster than any other product in history.
Wow.
And so adoption is like crazy, but then also is it going to be sticky? Really hard to know.
Yeah.
Is it going to stay there? As you said, don't pay for it. Like you just said it yourself, where it's like I pay for a tool and it got usurped by another tool.
Yeah.
It's probably going to keep happening. Like so. Where does the value lie?
When the space moves this quick, like I can't think of any other tech in.
It hasn't happened before. In my opinion, like it hasn't happened where the gold rush is that fast.
No, like I can only imagine. Years ago on this podcast, I had. She's now the Saudi ambassador to the US.
Oh well.
Princess Rima came on the show. I knew her I went to school with her in Amsterdam, and she said my father. My grandfather fought on horseback, holding a sword. My father fought in an F-18.
Yeah.
So think about that. Think about that amount of technological penetration into my community. Like think about there's some, and she had a far better way of saying it, but it was along the lines of like what our cultures had to deal with in 50 years from going from nomadic Bedouin horse to I'm literally having laser guided, weapons at my disposal.
Yeah.
Like, whoa, like,
totally.
Like that's kind of how I feel that's at that pace, like going from like somewhere like, I don't know, Doha or something, which was like literally tents and now skyscrapers and healthcare for everyone. Yeah. Like that was 50 years ago. There was nothing there and now it's everything at once. This culture shock, this future shock that we may feel is real. Like it can be amazing. Suddenly everyone's got way more free time and cheaper lawyers, but we have to be mindful that things are going to be very different quite quickly.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't disagree with that. But I also think that there's all the sayings of like, say, horses before cars and sort of saying like, push out, don't want to adopt it, and all of a sudden it becomes ubiquitous, and that's the way things are going, and then that becomes the future. And it sort of happens, and like even you sort of talked about Excel, like people were using calculators, and then all of a sudden like Microsoft launches Excel, and you're like, whoa, this has changed the game, right? And then for our ability to kind of like, I don't know, do anything, financial calculations, forecasts and stuff like that, rather than on a, writing it out, etc. And so I think that like there's often step changes in technology, but it just feels like this is probably at a faster, more impactful than we've seen for a long time on other sort of waves. So it's hard to understand what the normal will look like in 10 years around this.
Yeah.
Which is like, you can crystal ball it, but your hope is that you can find disease quicker. You can have preventative measures. Your hope that it's like you can enable it to live better and like achieve more work and stuff like that. But at the same time, you also hope that doesn't sort of go in the other direction where there's like everyone's worried about ethics and these things thinking for themselves. And
to talk about what we said before, like the analog of nuclear proliferation, the idea of how much energy is available through splitting an atom, like how many work hours are available, and the data is clear. Is way safer than coal, itself, like nuclear. Like, incredible what it could do for a society with that amount of like really abundant energy.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. Yet it can also be weaponized and destroy us all.
Exactly.
So
you just hope you got to put the guardrails in place.
Yeah.
Like I think that's obviously clear, and I think that.
What do they look like for you?
Honestly, it's moving so fast. It's hard to say. Like, what is the? I mean, so we talked to a guy from OpenAI like last week, and he was sort of talking about, they call it alignment, which is like, is the model that they've been building, is it nudging in the right direction from a positive perspective, and not sort of, but they also don't know how to control it yet, if you know what I mean. Like, it's the first time things have been done. So listening to a podcast last week, was one a professor in the space who'd been doing it for sort of 30 years, and he basically said like you need to put a hold on new training of models until we understand just how to control it. I'm not saying stop doing this. I think it's still good. Like, I don't see it as a bad thing. I just see it as if we just keep going like just guns blazing, like we might not be able to control it and put it back, like once it gets to a certain point of size. So they said GPT-4 should be the last, like, we should draw a line there and just say like, let's stop training new models until we kind of figure out and make sure we're comfortable with like the roadmap ahead for how we like make sure this is on the right track. And then we can start again and sort of wade through it, rather than there's commercial pressures, right? There's like these people have raised, I don't know, $10 billion or whatever. And it's like, no, this is going to be part of the future, and these big players are going to make it happen. So then you don't want to lose ground versus your competitors and things like that. So how do you get everyone in alignment to kind of make sure that there's the right level of sort of, governance and just control around this stuff?
If I look at it, like, if I try to think about it like something like Google, something like Google or Facebook, for example, they're two examples, right? The utility that they offer for free is so world changing.
Totally.
I'm prepared to be with the fact that they know where I am and what I say to everyone, because
people give up their privacy because of the convenience, right? You get convenience over privacy in that world.
Like, what is the level of utility that I'm going to get out of AI that makes me go like, I'm fine. There's no more parliament. I'm fine. And it's just being, taking humans completely out of the equation. There's no corruption because it doesn't exist. Yeah, it's run by robots. But look, I don't work. I just spend all day learning really interesting things and having great fun, making money out of the thin air or whatever I do.
I mean, like, one of the bear cases is that it's going to be universal basic income, and it's like going to be like, your jobs are going to look very different. I mean, this is in a world where it's sort of, like AI is kind of prevalent, and then, you can do a huge amount more with less. And so it's like so I don't know. Like, I don't know if it'll get to that. I don't believe it will. Like, I believe that it'll impact industries much, for sure. There's going to be a huge amount of disruption, but I also don't know that, like, I don't know, humans have managed to control these things, changes in over the course of over time. So
Yuval Noah Harari is probably real close to another book. He's like, God damn it. He's like, That, or he's like, it's okay, but I have this one written. It's fine. It's okay. I'm one step ahead of you. Come on. Look, I could talk to you for a long time about this kind of stuff, but for me, it's all about education. Like, don't be surprised by this.
Yes.
You know, ignorance about this kind of stuff is not a great idea.
Yeah.
Like, be proactive in figuring out and keeping an eye on where this tech's going, because it'll impact you. It'll impact the way you work. It'll impact the way your kids learn at school.
Yeah.
It really will.
Totally agree. So I mean, like, my job is to stay on top of this. So we do, we go to work every day trying to understand what, where technology is going and all of this. So like, I'm sort of at the front of it and have the privilege of sort of getting, seeing all of this firsthand. But everyone, like, I'd say 90% of the people that more are doing it for the right reasons and not bad actors, if you know what I mean. But I think when you're doing it, if you're just in your everyday sort of career, I do think that it's going to have impacts to you over time. But it also makes sense for you, like, from a commercial perspective, to explore it, because I think there's a lot of opportunity for you to help, like, your own businesses be better and sort of better serve your customers and stuff. So I don't see it as I think totally it's worth spending the time to sort of to get across it and trial it. Like, you haven't trialed it, you should definitely spend some time just exploring it. Yeah, I mean, even for fun stuff, right?
Yeah.
You're going on a holiday, go and say, like, hey, help us set up an agenda. Like, what are the coolest things to see on this? I'm going to California. Tell me what, if you had 7 days, what would you do?
And keep in mind travel times, and I wouldn't want to drive for more than 2 hours at a time because I've got little kids.
Yeah.
Go.
Literally. And you just plan it and plans it out for you, and it's like, that's awesome. Like, anyway.
That's pretty cool. I like that. And then people who work at flight centers are like, fucking shush.
Yeah, don't do it.
Shush.
Don't do it.
I can do that.
Yeah.
Oh, that's my job. You bastard.
That's true.
But this is the thing, and this is why I think it's really important that whatever job you do, my job is already being changed by this.
You could use AI to help cut this and make sure that all my ums and ahs are, like, removed, etc. So.
The app is called Descript, and that's what
good.
it does.
Yeah, exactly.
But the thing is, at this point, and that's the one I use to make my own voice. The thing is, it's going to get better, but it's still not quite great. Where it cuts the ums and ahs out, it doesn't take into account your vocal cadence or your speech or how long you maybe paused for effect or to show that it took him a couple of seconds to think about that. He really thought about that. It'll cut that completely out. Yeah. Therefore, making the next thing you say sound like, well, it's not really, like, there's the nuance of communication is lost in that kind of automated part. But yes, it's on the way. It's freaking
fascinating.
It's fascinating stuff. And I implore you to just, exactly as Stu said, just play with it, just kind of explore it and know what it's going to mean for you and your kids. And keep an eye on it, dude, because you don't want to turn around one day and go, like I'm the kind of guy, mate, who I read some news articles and I got online, and then 2 days later we had 50 rat tests and we had 100 masks at our house.
Yeah.
6 weeks after that, people are like, there's no fucking rat test and no fucking mask. I'm like, mate, did you, like, it was in the news. Like, didn't you see that day? Yeah. Like, it's just, this is the part where I'm telling you, get on it now. Don't be surprised by this. Like, as you know, I heard today this really great idea about crisis comms. Okay. So when something terrible happens in a company or, a sports team or something like that, in the crisis is not the time to try to get all your research and get all your numbers and get all your facts because you don't have time to then get those facts so you can make a better decision. Yeah. Make sure you stay prepared. Get all that research done. Get all that stuff. Know everything you need to know so that if a crisis occurs, you have everything at your service. You don't want to be figuring out what's the law around that.
Yeah, it's like in the in the thick of battle.
No, not at all. Thanks, man. Thanks for making the time to come around.
It's awesome. Thanks for having us.
I really appreciate it, man. Thank you.